It is my great privilege to be hosting a fireside chat today with Matt Daly, who's currently the CMO at DroneDeploy in the US. Any luck bringing him up on the screen? One moment, caller. Sorry, Matt. There he is.
I can hear you
guys. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. All right. So it's pretty rare that you come across an individual that's worked in sales, marketing, and CEO roles. So I'm really excited to tap into Matt's wealth of experience today. So thank you so much for your time, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, good to be here. Look forward to chatting with you guys.
Awesome. So not to steal your thunder, I wonder if you would give us the précis version of your resume and the roles that you've been in to date.
Yeah, it's not a terribly long one. So studied engineering in college, mechanical engineering, quickly realized I was going to be a very mediocre engineer and promptly got into sales out of university. So worked for a company for 9 years called Faro Technologies that makes 3D imaging and measurement equipment. Actually, while I was there, I ran into my first co-founder, Philip, co-founded Instruction Site in 2016, acquired by DroneDeploy last year in 2022, and here I am.
Fantastic. Matt's playing it down a little bit. He was the CEO of Instruction Site and held many sales roles, so a well-seasoned professional. So yeah, an impressive lineup. And my first major question is, in working across those sales and marketing functions, what's one of the things that we could do as marketers to achieve that pesky alignment between sales and marketing?
I think the absolute best thing any marketer can do is just start by trying to sell. Whether that doesn't necessarily mean taking a job in sales, but just doing absolutely everything you can to get closer to the sales team, be in the trenches with them would be one. Just like sort of maybe emotional reaction to that is just like be very close to sales and really understand what they're going through and what their customers are challenged with. The other one would just be like, yeah, make sure you don't have very different goals. Like if revenue is the goal, if growth is the goal, let's align on those and make sure that the things that we in marketing are working towards are not very far away from that. Understanding that certainly we can't be the ultimate end game of driving revenue. As close as we can possibly be to that from a metrics and how we measure ourselves perspective, the better.
Yeah, great. Good advice on the ride-alongs with sales. I know that listening to some of the customer objections, you can get some great content ideas. So if you haven't already done that, definitely buddy up with your sales team and go and speak to some customers with them. All right, so switching hats now, go back into the trenches as a salesperson. What's the biggest bugbear for you as a salesperson in relation to marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard someone mention this in the previous discussion, but look, as a salesperson, your time is literally your money and sometimes half of your paycheck. So the only thing worse than not having any meetings is having bad meetings. And so like probably that would be the biggest pain point, I suppose, would be just generally producing meetings and leads and opportunities that are just with low value customers. So everything that we can do to shift the quality of what we're producing in the right direction, even if it means less quantity, is usually very much appreciated by sales.
Yeah, great. And then having been a CEO and now leading a global marketing team, what are the metrics that you think matter most to the senior executives and what should really be obsessing about?
Yeah, I mean, we just had our board meeting, so this is really very, very simple. It's the board generally wants to know like what is pipeline looking like, and what is the conversion of that pipeline looking like, and what does that mean in terms of our ability to hit the number next quarter and the following quarter. And just going back to what I said earlier, I think the closer we can stick to pipeline generation and conversion of that into revenue, the better. Certainly, there's lots of things we can track further up funnel and upstream from that. But sales velocity would be another one. So if we're trying to make decisions about what markets to pursue or where we should concentrate our resources and our money and our time, looking at sales velocity as a way of understanding, dollars per day, where should we go spend our money, I think is another thing that even at the board level, the executives are going to care a lot about in terms of understanding what marketing can and should do and what KPIs to track.
Yeah, great. And I guess having the right tools, like Tim was just talking about, to be able to measure that and attribution as well. Just switching tack slightly. So what global trends are you seeing that you think we down under here in New Zealand should be looking at?
Hard to know what exactly down under New Zealand is being exposed and sort of hot right now, but I have to imagine the thing that is the most obvious thing I think to talk about right now is like what's happening with large language models and AI, for example, Chat GPT being the most sort of consumer facing manifestation of that. But LLMs and everything that's happening with those and stringing those together to create auto GPTs that further automate processes is if it's got to be the single biggest, most transformational thing I'm seeing in space right now, and probably all of business, not just marketing.
Yeah, super interesting. We had a futurist, Ben Reed, talk to us about that this morning, actually. So nice to see that's actually happening in real life up there. So then with all these changes with AI and ChatGPT, how do we as marketers stay relevant and add value? Like our jobs are obviously changing or need to change.
Yeah, I think it's continuing to focus on the things that the computers don't do well. The computers are becoming incredibly sophisticated at counting and understanding and sorting and prioritizing and predicting, and that's all very powerful. But like end of the day, this is sales and marketing is still people making decisions emotionally, and the more we can be very, very close to the customer and like really understand what they need and putting all those puzzle pieces together, I think is just one thing. Just like stay very close to the customers and just the basics of human psychology and how those things work, I think can be very powerful. But also just don't be the person not using these tools and feeling like they're going to take our jobs, as opposed to be an absolute superpower for what we could do, and maybe we can 10x our own productivity. So I think just getting your hands on these things and getting started is what I'd recommend, and definitely what we will be doing over here at DroneDeploy.
Perfect. Looking forward to that. So what advice would you give to the marketers in our audience? And we've got about 120 people in the room right now, which I think you can see, who work for local Kiwi tech companies that are looking to expand in the US. What advice would you give us, and where will we start?
I'll qualify that I don't know that I am like the de facto right person to definitely give you the right answer here. I could certainly share that there was actually a company in our office just yesterday from New Zealand that I think had a pretty interesting strategy that might be worth sharing with the group here, which is they had decided to go to Canada first and focused on Canadian businesses as a way of sort of entering North America and acquiring logos that were recognizable by other American businesses, without necessarily going straight to the US and just trying to go after it. And it seems like it's been a pretty good strategy for them. I think I recognize the logos that they've got up there. They certainly seem like they're less far away now, I suppose, for an American business. So I think it's at least worth considering that might be a simpler, lower friction strategy for entering North America and then sort of moving into the US from there.
Yeah, interesting. I think the other thing we talked about when we were having a chat prior to the conference was actually hiring a human being in the market. So you've got someone to shake a palm and show up to meetings and avoid that channel first strategy. So yeah, an interesting thought there too.
Yeah, I think there's it really depends on what industry you're in. I think there are some industries where shaking a hand and taking somebody out to lunch is absolutely critical, and you'll have a very hard time making progress without that. Depending on what you sell and who you sell to, that may not be as important. But in the worlds that I've played in, it's always been a pretty big deal to have a physical human being in the market with boots on the ground that can go shake a hand and take somebody out to lunch and get to know them a little bit and build a relationship, before they decide to do business with you.
Yeah, I guess people buy from people, right? Or maybe not soon with ChatGPT. Who knows? So
yeah, I don't buy that.
Same. So how different are global marketing plays really? You run a global marketing team. How different is the global marketing play?
I think it really depends on the market and the product. It's such a hard question to answer. I think in the end they're very similar, right? The core concepts are the same, and if you look at how people buy and how they like to go through a process, generally those are the same. But again, just like if when we talk about doing something in Japan versus doing something in even Australia, there can be vast differences, not just in language, but in the way that people want to buy. Like, sometimes it's a channel and not a direct strategy, and putting a person in market and having a direct seller there, and trying to market to them in that way actually isn't effective. So I think unfortunately the answer is it on the ground level it varies widely. I'm sure, at least that's been my experience. The sort of core fundamentals of make sure that you are delivering value to somebody as quick as possible and helping them explore and understand that value is probably pretty universal.
Mm-hmm. And I guess empathizing with messaging that aligns to tone, and your Japan example especially, so not suggesting it's cookie cutter. Yeah. All right. So
certainly as soon as you get to the messaging point, that's all very, yeah, absolutely. The messaging matters a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So with a distributed workforce, how do you build a culture that promotes commitment, values, and energy to drive the business forward? At DroneDeploy, we're a team of distributed workers, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that anybody's like absolutely figured this out and cracked the code on how to do all of those things with a completely distributed team. But I can say that there's some sort of like core pillars of making that work that obviously, Caroline, you've been a part of us sort of continuing to improve there. And one of them is just really good asynchronous communication. Nothing is more frustrating for people in a remote workforce than feeling like they have to be in a million meetings and be in every meeting. So the better you can get at really good written documentation, sending videos, creating habits among the team that are about documenting things and sharing them, so that somebody that's going to wake up in 12 hours can read it on their own time, I think is really, really critical just as a sort of foundational piece. I think another piece is actually less about being distributed, more about making sure that people get in touch in person from time to time, and actually have a couple times a year where they're going to be physically in person, because the rest of that remote time is it's just not the same. But I think asynchronous communication and really good writing and sort of video recording and sharing skills is pretty critical to all of that.
Yeah, that's definitely made a difference since you've been in the role. And Matt introduced Notion as a tool. I don't know if anybody's heard of Notion, but it's a really great way to collaborate and have all your documentation in one single place that you can share around the organization. So yeah, that's been really interesting to watch the dynamic of the team change from a very siloed distributed team to a very cohesive team that now works together across common goals of acquisition and expansion within accounts. So yeah, so far so good. Many of our members here have leadership aspirations. So what advice would you give to young marketers looking to step up into a senior leadership role?
Yeah, honestly, I think the single most important thing whenever I'm talking to somebody that has leadership aspirations and is looking to move up is stay focused on what you want to learn, more so than like the job you're looking for. I think as long as the focus that you have is on learning the things you want and need to learn to get you where you're looking to go, more so than the job, I think that's just like number one. I think the second thing would be to really try to get a much broader perspective. The more that you as a marketer can really understand what's going on in sales, what's going on in customer success, what's going on with the business and the objectives, what is the executive team thinking about? And if you don't have that context, you should seek it and go get it and make sure that you really understand these things. Because when you, as a either individual contributor or even a frontline manager, are really dialed into the broader context of what's happening, and you're making better decisions that are overall good for the team as a whole, generally speaking, that's noticed and observed, and it tends to be rewarded. So I'd say go broad with sort of your understanding of the business beyond just what's happening in your world.
Yeah, that's great advice. And getting involved in projects outside of your remit, maybe to showcase who you are and what you can do. I'm going to throw it open to the audience now, which
Totally.
Matt didn't know, but he does now. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to throw at this amazing leader? Anyone?
Someone will need to repeat them to me unless you
Yeah,
have a
I
mic
will.
out there.
I'll do that. Hi.
Perfect.
Okay, so the question is, by introducing Notion, what other tools have we dropped? Is that right? Yep.
Yep. Well, there was, I think, like an amalgamation of tools. There was one group was even within marketing, we were not all using the same tools. I know like content was using Asana, for example. We did end up deprecating Asana. And I think there was a number of other sort of tools being used in smaller silos. I don't know all of them that were out there, but ultimately the one that did end up becoming deprecated was Asana. And using it, we are using it as a work management tool. So beyond just sort of like a corporate wiki, we're actually using it for project and task management. It's not the best absolute tool for that, but consolidating everybody into a single like work tool, one that is connected to the product team as well, has been pretty big for us.
Mm. And relying less on Google Docs and weird collaboration and having it in one place, which has been really good. And also providing, it's a really nice way to provide the business, senior executives, with a view that isn't necessarily in the weeds. So you can actually just provide them with that elevator view of what you're working on, which has been awesome too. Any other questions?
Totally.
Nope. Oh, yeah.
So you talked a lot about growth and revenue. What about brand? Your business that currently is the market.
Mm-hmm.
Brand plan.
So we've talked a lot about growth. What about brand? How does brand fit into our overall strategy?
How does brand fit into our overall strategy? I sort of link category and brand together as one thing. And we spend a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time thinking more recently about how we build and design the category that we are in, and in the process of doing that, sort of build our brand. I guess I'm looking for me. Is there something more specific that would be interesting that I could share specific to brand? That question is pretty broad.
Yeah. Yeah. So dollars in resource investment for across the team compared to other marketing mix.
Yeah, I can say we're when I arrived here, when I took over this role 3 months ago, a huge chunk of our ad spend was in what was called brand as a bucket, but was ultimately, if you actually looked at the Google ad bill, you would notice that it contained a lot of other things that were in fact not brand. So I think right now, actually, as a business, like 75% of our marketing spend, or something in that nature, according to some report, says that we're spending that money on brand as opposed to other specific campaigns. But I think, again, like having broken that apart, we're actually looking at the fact that it's not quite that significant. DroneDeploy is a 10-year-old business and actually does have a really strong brand. And so I think investing in that has been a good strategy and a good play for quite some time for the business. I don't think we'll invest more or less than that. But I do think one of the sort of transitions that we're making as a business, whereas maybe before we were very horizontal and investing in sort of the DroneDeploy brand and all the different things you can do with a drone, we are moving to more like an account-based business where the investments that we'll make will be more targeted at specific industries as opposed to sort of like the brand umbrella itself.
We're going through.
I think there will be a shift there for us.
Yeah. Yeah, as Matt said, building category has been really important. So making sure people understand what it is that we actually do in this category. And because DroneDeploy has recently acquired a couple of businesses which are outside of their standard kind of drone brand, there has been a lot of really interesting conversations internally about the relevance of that brand. And we're going through a bit of a spike at the moment in dollars and cents and resource around building a new website, which better articulates our stance in the category that we're creating. Probably got another minute if there's
Well
another
said.
question. Thank you. Boss man. Nick. Okay, so we're talking about how do we embed corporate culture in a distributed team globally? Like, what tips and tricks would you have for doing that?
I think I would probably just take a minute to evaluate like what aspects of the corporate culture are critical and important to your team. And one thing you could do, which we recently did here on the marketing team, is create like what's called a team charter. And we actually in Austin, Texas, went through an exercise when we did an offsite where we got together and as a team put some things put some post-its up on a board to basically talk about like how do we want to operate? What do we value? What do we think is important? What do we want to be known for? That exercise ultimately produced a team charter that is sort of like the guidepost for how we want to operate as a team. Could be helpful to go through an exercise like that. If there are just things you want to directly port over from the company's culture that you think are super important for your team, I would just think really hard about like what of those things are really important that still work in a remote environment. I don't know the context of this business, but I would also just encourage you to evaluate whether or not all those things will still work in a fully remote environment. I've seen a lot of companies try to continue to do things and have cultural norms in a company that was once co-located and all working in an office together, and then try to port that over to a remote team. And generally that doesn't tend to work very well. I would, and if that's the case in your business, I would really think about what are some new norms and some new rituals and some new cultural habits that might serve your team even better than like what's happening with the company. But like maybe to say, if you do have things you really care about with the company, I would run an exercise with your team and get them to contribute to that and help you understand potentially as their leader, like what are the aspects of the company culture that they believe can and should be infused into the team that would still be valuable in a remote environment.
Thank you. Nick's giving me the thumbs up and I'm getting a red flashing light as well, which means we're about to go to a break. So thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time out of your busy day to join us and give us your insights on marketing. See you on our next
Thanks a lot, you guys.